Welcome back, everyone. It's Eric from Rare Candy, and today, as you guys can see, I am back after a little bit of a hiatus. You know, the content on the channel has kind of slowed down a little bit after kind of everything that went down with Zach, and right after that, my computer was really struggling to kind of create content. I basically had to build a new computer, and some of the parts kind of took longer than others, which kind of put things, made our content process a little bit slower than normal. But here today, like I said, we're back kicking things off with some new content, kicking off part one of our post-rotation guide that we're going to be doing. You know, we did one last year. I think last year's was probably a little bit too long-winded. I think Zach had made like 15 or 16 parts. We're going to condense that down a good bit for this year's post-rotation guide. But just going to go over kind of all the cards that we are still going to have access to. You know, not all of these are probably going to be staples of every single deck, but I wanted to at least show off, all of the different options that we have. And I wanted to make this guide a little bit earlier, but we previously didn't know what was in Infinity Zone, so I didn't want to start making this and then Infinity Zone give us some reprints, making some of the content in these post-rotation guides a little redundant. So now that we kind of have a somewhat general idea of what we're getting in Darkness Ablaze, I felt a little bit more comfortable making this one. So here for part one of our post-rotation guide, we're going to be looking at like draw cards, consistency cards, just kind of the main engine stuff that we're going to be using for a lot of decks to get set up. And of course, all of this is going to be pre-Darkness Ablaze. This is going to be all of the cards that we currently have that are staying through the rotation. So of course the rotation is going to be team up forward, and that's what we are going to have here. So of course, let's look at the some of the Pokemon that we're still going to have going on into the new season. So first we have Audino. This is a card, hasn't really seen too much play, but I do want to point out, has this ability, if you're active, you can draw a card. We are losing the skateboard, making Jirachi a little less viable than it previously once was. Audino can still use U-turn board, so you do have that as an option. Again, guys, not all of these are going to be the most competitive cards, but I wanted to at least show off pretty much most everything that we have, just to give you some different ideas. So yeah, we have Audino here. We have Rangaroo still, lurking around. We just got this guy in Sword and Shield, so he's going to be around for, a good minute. This Primate Wisdom ability is still going to be great going into the new format. So of course, once you're going to switch a card from your hand with the top card of your deck. Very good card we've been seeing in a lot of decks, and I don't really expect that to change very much. Cincino, another very good card we got in Sword and Shield, has this make do ability. With a Rangaroo leaving the format though, Cincino might see a drop in play, just because this has primarily been seen in like the Rangaroo style control decks. And with that being gone, I mean, it's hard to say if we will see this as much, but this ability I do still think is really good. So of course, discard a card from your hand, draw two, like the old Zoroark GX, like the old Empoleon from Dark Explorers. Very good ability. Who knows, we might still see Cincino see some play. Still a good ability. One I think you kind of want to keep your eye on in the new format no matter what. Persian GX, this is a card probably isn't going to see a particular uptick in play if I had to guess. Just because we are starting to lose more and more of our Pokemon GX from the game, making this ability a little bit more situational. But of course, if one of our Pokemon EX or GX was knocked out during your opponent's last turn, you may search your deck for up to 2 cards, put them into your hand. So we have seen Persian C play in various different GX decks in the past, like Zoroark variants and of course Blacephalon GX variants. But, lately Persian hasn't been that popular, and I don't really expect that to change too much, since really the only sort of popular Pokemon GX that we have remaining are going to be mainly tag teams, and most of those can still use a Jirachi engine or like a Dedenne based engine or something like that. And I'm not sure Persian is going to warrant seeing any play, but, with Pokemon GX seeing less play and having less Pokemon in the format, makes Power Plant a little bit worse, making Persian a little bit better. So who knows? I think this is a card you still have to kind of keep in mind. I think its ability is still strong. It's just kind of hard to justify the space for a stage 1 in a lot of decks. Pidgeotto. This is another card I do think gets a little bit worse. Part of the thing that made Pidgeotto such a good stage 1 sort of support Pokemon is that it actually had access to Professor Elm's lecture. And of course we do have other similar cards like Sonia and Professor Oak's setup. I forget if that's the name of it. We have other similar cards to search out our basics, but the big thing with Elm was that we could actually search for Pidgeotto because it has 60 HP. And that was one of the big draws of the card. So as a result, I don't really think there's too much incentive to play this over something like Cincino. I think most of the time we would prefer other things, but nevertheless, I think Airmail is still a solid ability. Get a look at the top 2 cards of your deck, keep one, put one on the bottom of your deck. We have Silvally GX, another card really hasn't seen too much play up until now. But again, as we keep losing more and more Pokemon GX, it makes a lot of those GX hate cards like Great Catcher, Power Plant, etc. start to see less and less play, and I think that opens up more room for Silvally to be good, because right now one of the big downsides to this card, kind of like with Persian as well, is that it's a great catcher target, which is a little bit unfortunate. 210 HP is not what it once was. You know, Zacian V, just a normal base form Pokemon V, can hit for 230, easily knock this out. And that's not even counting all of the powerful Pokemon V Max we have in format as well. So Silvally a lot of times is not the safest of bench sitters. But again, as we lose more Pokemon GX, this is going to be a better Pokemon, or a safer Pokemon to have in play. But Disc Reload, this is a great ability, very similar to the old Octillery from Breakthrough, which saw a ton of play. Get a draw until you have 5 cards in hand. Solid ability here. We have the Naganadel GX, another card that does get a little bit worse. This is mainly seen play for the ability, at least, in Blacephalon GX variants, but Blacephalon, of course, is rotating, making this, I think, a little less viable, and a bunch of other Ultra Beasts are rotating as well. So Ultra Conversion, not what it once was, but of course, discard a card, or discard an Ultra Beast from your hand if you do draw 3. I don't think we're going to see this card too much, but I think if we do, it'll probably be more as a Mewtwo Mew target to be able to copy Venom Shot, more than likely at least. We have Dragonite, another card probably not going to see too much play, but of course has this ability. Once during your turn, you get to search your deck for a supporter card, put it to your hand. Of course, this is a solid ability, just it's on a stage 2 Pokemon. We just lost Mysterious Treasure, we lost Lance Prism Star, so some of the ways to kind of cheat this into play are now gone. And already with those cards, Dragonite didn't see too much play, so not the greatest fan of this ability, but again, I just do want to throw it out there for you guys to at least think about. So we have Cleffa. Cleffa, one of the baby Pokemon, has one of these abilities where your turn ends on a coin flip, but if you do flip heads, you get shuffle your hand into your deck, draw 6. So this is kind of like a one prize Zacian in a way, if you think about that. Like a lot of decks in the early game, they fall back on an Intrepid Sword to kind of end their turn while they set up. Cleffa fills a similar role, but I think Zacian is generally better. But Cleffa, of course, only gives up 1 prize, and it has free retreat as well, which is really nice. So do want to throw that out there. We have Whimsicott up next, and this is another card I don't think is going to see too much play, especially now that we are losing Ditto Prism Star. Unfortunately, one of my favorite cards we've had ever since it's come out. Whimsicott becomes a much less flexible card. You now have to actually devote a 1/1 line of this. So I think Whimsicott probably isn't going to see too much play unless you're playing Whimsicott GX. I think that would be more of a situation you might see this. But this is a good ability, though. Whenever you evolve into it, search your deck for any card, put it into your hand. We do have Scoop Up Net as well, so we can reuse this over and over if we want to as well. So that is something that is pretty cool about Whimsicott right now in the format. But like I said, even with Ditto in the format, this hadn't seen too much play. So I think if this is going to see play, it's going to be in the context of a Whimsicott GX deck or some other Whimsicott deck where you're already running some copies of Cottony to start with. So Salazzle, luckily this is a card that really I don't think its playability is going to be too harshly impacted. We did lose Fiery Flint in the rotation, but we do still have other things like Fire Crystal, Giant Heart, etc. So Roaster, fantastic ability for fire Pokemon. You discard a fire energy from hand, and if you do, draw 3 cards. This hasn't seen the most play. I think most fire decks have preferred greens engines in the past, or like a Jirachi based engine. But I think Salazzle really doesn't get hurt too much by the rotation, and we still could see this, maybe see some play. We'll have to see, but I think this is a solid ability for fire Pokemon to consider. We have Sjoberg. Sjoberg has mainly kind of seen play up until this point as like a stall variant with Lily's Pokédoll. And, I don't think the rotation is going to change that too much. But, of course, we can just draw a card with it. Not a particularly impressive ability that we have. So I don't think you're playing this for the... like, strictly for the ability. I think if you're playing Sjoberg, it's probably for a deck that uses, like, Lily's Pokédolls and things like that. Otherwise, I think there's probably just better consistency Pokemon you could run instead of this. We still have the GOAT, Dedenne GX in the format. Dedenne is not going anywhere. Definitely been one of the absolute best consistency boosting cards we've had since it's gotten printed. I do think things will change a little bit now that Crobat V is coming into the mix. I think Crobat is going to be a little bit better for certain archetypes, but Dedenne is still a really good card. Discard your hand, draw 6 whenever you bench it. So I think this is definitely going to be better for decks that like things in the discard pile, and also like all basic decks that don't have a lot of moving pieces. Whereas Crobat V, I think it's going to be better for decks that, might be more evolution heavy, and have a lot more combo pieces and things moving around your deck you don't want to discard a lot of the time. So Dedenne, I think, is still going to be a good card, but Crobat V is definitely going to give it some competition in a lot of lists. We have Magneton with that call signal ability. Definitely a card that has only, I think, started maybe in like recent months, kind of gotten some attention for this ability. But of course, you can knock it out, search your deck for up to 3 supporter cards, reveal them, put them into your hand. So one of the big things with this is we can grab Lieutenant Surge, and then from there play that and a couple of other supporter cards to do like some big wombo combo shenanigans. So I think Magneton is still solid. We still have greens in the format as well. So I think you still could play this with like your big tag teams without abilities, or your VMAXs without abilities. So I think Magneton still seems like kind of a cool card going forward. Of course, we still have Jirachi as well. Even though a skateboard is leaving, guys, I don't want you to think Jirachi is going anywhere. I think Jirachi is still going to be a fantastic card going forward. We still have copies of Switch. We have Scoop Up Net. So I think Jirachi is still going to be solid for that Stellar Wish ability. But of course, some decks are going to maybe have to consider other engines now that we don't have a skateboard running around. But nevertheless, Jirachi is still a great card, guys. Don't get that confused. We have Zacian V, of course. We have a lot of decks right now relying on Zacian as kind of like an early game Pokemon to kind of fall back and use your ability to get set up with. I don't think that's going to change too much. We haven't really lost anything that would prevent you from searching this out. So Zacian V, I think, is still going to be also good in the early game, just as kind of a setup Pokemon. Oricorio GX, another Pokemon that I do think actually does get better and better as we lose more and more Pokemon GX, just because that is going to reduce the prevalence of things like Power Plant, Great Catcher, etc. But either way, even if those cards still see a consistent amount of play, Dance of Trivia has proven itself to be a pretty good ability in a lot of the one prize decks, and I don't think that is going to change too much. So of course, when something gets knocked out on your opponent's last turn, on your turn, you can draw 3 cards. Pretty solid ability for some of these different one prize and combo oriented decks. This Mismagic is kind of in a similar boat as the Magneton we looked at. We still have greens, we still have Duskstone as well, so we can still easily get this up and running. And Mismagic will probably still see play in the types of decks it saw playing before, mainly greens variants in particular. So of course we can knock it out, draw until we have 7 cards in hand. We have the Inteleon line. Of course, Drizzile will allow us to search our deck for a trainer card, and the Inteleon allows us to search our deck for 2 trainer cards. I'm really not sold these Pokemon are going to get substantially better after rotation. Yeah, I'm not really convinced of that. I think they're still okay cards. I think they'll probably see an approximate amount of play that they see now, which is very little. But I do think these abilities are still good. Right now, there's just a lot of things kind of overshadowing them. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe with a skateboard rotating, making Jirachi a little less consistent, maybe Inteleon's actually a better way just to find your trainer cards. We'll have to see. We have Judge Whistle, not the strongest of draw cards, and right now we did lose Judge, so actually the only way you can get an effect off this is to use the first effect just to draw a card, because Judge has now rotated. So Judge Whistle, not too great, but we did lose Acrobike, and this is a very similar style effect that we have here. So Judge Whistle, who knows, maybe it'll be an Acrobike replacement. I'm not too sold on that, but if you're desperate for some item-based draw, we do have this. We have Nugget, a kind of more recent card. This is another card I'm not sold on seeing a whole lot of play, but it does pair very nicely with the Oranguru we got in Sword and Shield. So you can put Nugget on top of your deck with Primate Wisdom, and whenever you draw into it on your turn, you get to draw another 3 cards, which is really nice. So this is a kind of clunky form of item-based draw, but item-based draw is historically been good, so we do have to at least think about Nugget when building our decks. We have Pokegear. This is going to help us find our different supporters that we have, and luckily we actually didn't lose too many crucial supporters in this rotation, just in terms of general deck building. Like, we lost Cynthia, which is honestly a really big bummer for, I think, like traditional stage 2 and stage 1 decks, but Pokegear is still really nice at helping us find the right supporters that we want to use. We have Rotom Bike, another card I honestly still don't think is too good, but we'll throw it out there. Draw 2 up 6 cards in your hand, then your turn ends. Not a big fan of this card before rotation. That, in my opinion, really doesn't change after rotation as well. Stadium Nav. So I mean, I felt like this is probably the closest category I could put this card into. It's a consistency booster for your stadium cards. So of course, flip 2 coins for each head, search your deck for a stadium. Self-explanatory. Tag Call. So even though this is kind of like a Pokemon search card, I opted to put it in this part of the video just because we can search your deck for things like Cynthia and Caitlyn and tag team supporters that way. So that's why we are including that. We have Bill's Analysis still hanging around. So look at the top 7 cards of your deck, get 2 trainer cards, put them into our hand. Bill's Analysis has seen some play since it's been printed. It hasn't been like a go-to engine like with something like greens or anything like that. It's usually kind of like a secondary sort of supporter to help get set up. It's like once you run out of space for greens, you can't play more than 4 greens, so you play some copies of Bill's Analysis. So I think we'll continue to see something similar going forward. We have Blaine's Last Stand. Even though this did rotate in Dragon Majesty, we did get a reprint in Hidden Fates. So nevertheless, I don't think Blaine's is going to get that much better. I think the effect of this is really good. Draw 2 cards for each fire Pokemon you have in play. But the issue is you can only play it when it's the last card in your hand. So you can use things like Duskull or like Galarian Meowth to try to like artificially lower your hand size if you want. But generally speaking, if you're playing fire Pokemon, you rather just Welder most of the time anyway. So I think overall there's usually better things that we would rather be playing. Blaine's Quisho, definitely a card that's not too great. It's kind of a meme, but you make your opponent guess a Pokemon in your hand. If they guess right, they draw 4. If you guess right, you draw 4. The only reason I opted to include this is because there is the Poltegeist and of course Gengar Mimikyu GX, which could potentially want your opponent to have more cards in hand. So that's the only reason why I opted to actually include it in this video. Blue's Tactics. Another card really hasn't been too great, but at the end of your turn, draw until you have 8 cards in your hand. So not a horrible card by any means, but we did lose a good bit of our staple draw supporters like Cynthia, like Lily. We also lost other stuff like Tate and Liza, TV Reporter, etc. So we do have to start considering some of our other draw options we have in the format. So I think Blues is okay. Not convinced that it's probably good enough to see widespread play though. So we have Clay. This is a card I do like. However, discard the top 7 cards of your deck. Any of those cards or items, put them into your hand. We have seen some people experiment with Clay up until now. I think this card is still probably just as good as it was pre-rotation, which is kind of just a middle-of-the-road supporter. Sometimes this discard is very harsh, but at the same time, being able to look at the top 7 cards of your deck allows you to see a lot of cards, but most of the time, Professor's Research can be a little bit better. So Coach Trainer, I do think this is still a card to consider right now. Most of the only Pokemon GX in the format, other than like Dedenne, are going to be tag teams which means Coach Trainer will probably net you a consistent draw 4 in a lot of those decks. We've seen this mainly like greens variants with things like Gardevoir Sylveon, and you know, maybe we'll still see something like that, but most of the time probably not. But nevertheless, I do want to throw it out there. We do still have this card. So Cynthia and Caitlin, great card we've had for a while now. Not the strongest of draw cards, but it is nice. We get a supporter card back. We can find it with Tag Call as well. So Cynthia, Caitlin, still good cards, especially in decks that play things like Welder. I think Cynthia, Caitlin are still going to be considerations for those types of decks. Erica's Hospitality, initially a card I remember that saw a lot of hype when it was first announced. It's kind of fallen out of favor, and now, you know, once we had Cynthia, Marnie, and Professor's Research, there was kind of little reason to play this, but now that we've lost like one of our main 3 pillars of draw supporters, I think Erica's actually does sort of become a more enticing draw option as like a 1 of, maybe a 2 of. It's just not a card you want to see early on, but mid game this card is very, very strong. Sometimes netting you like a draw 4, draw 5, which is pretty decent. We have green still in format, definitely one of the best searching cards that we've had up until now. I do think the like greens power plant sort of engine has gradually sort of gotten weaker over time, especially now too that we have Crobat B coming into the mix. The sort of the disruption aspects to the greens engine aren't really as strong as they once were. But nevertheless, this is definitely still one of the best searching cards we have. You definitely have to keep it in mind when you're deck building. So definitely want to point that out. Use Mahala, definitely been one of the better search cards in recent memory. Especially now that we're getting more and more of the special energies getting printed, being able to search a deck for a stadium, special energy, and a tool is a really nice combination. So even though it is a little bit more specific than something like greens or like Bill's Analysis, these highly selective cards you can grab are going to be really good in a lot of cases. We have Hapu. Look at the top 6. Put 2 cards in your hand, discard the others. So Hapu could still be good, much like with Clay in decks that do want specific things in the discard. So most of the time, Research is going to be better for just generally speaking, but select decks that prefer highly specific cards in the discard pile might still think about playing something like Hapu or Clay. So Ingo and Emmett, again, now that we've lost Cynthia, guys, it does sort of open up, you know, maybe some opportunity for another draw support to fill that like 3rd pillar. So if you've already maxed your 4 Professor's Research out and you want more discarding cards, Ingo and Emmett's another consideration. So discard your hand, draw 5, or you can discard, draw 5 from the bottom of your deck. So, okay card, but again, it's another one of these ones that might just get overshadowed since we do have Professor's Research. Janine, kind of like Hapu, it's not, you don't get to dig quite as far with it, but at the same time you don't have to discard. Janine, probably not a great card unless you're playing something like Venomoth GX, which, you know, why would you most of the time? But definitely want to throw it out there. We do still have this card. Louis Full Force, another sort of mediocre draw card, but again, if you're playing something like the Solgaleo and Lunala tag team, then you might have to consider playing this, but on its own, I think Louis Full Force is a little bit weak. Marnie, however, is going to be one of the big staple draw supporters. I think most decks going forward are going to be playing, like, unless you're at like a Welder-based deck or something like that, you're going to play 4 Research, 4 Marnie, and then maybe some copies of Pokegear, or maybe like a 1 of Erica's Hospitality, but this is going to be definitely one of our primary draw supporters going forward. Milo, not too great, but we have seen Sophocles see play in the past, so I opted to include this. It's effectively Sophocles, but you have the option to draw fewer cards if you want to. Misty's Determination, we have a lot of good searching cards in the format already, so I don't think Misty's is going to see much play. It has seen play in the past in previous formats it existed in, like there was certain archetypes that played this as like a 1 of. However, I don't think this card is very good right now, so not a big fan of this. I think we have other better searching options, but nevertheless, again, I just want to highlight it here. Misty's Favor, search your deck for 3 supporter cards. Generally speaking, Pokegear is going to be a little bit better, Eldegoss V is going to be better, but it is a consistency boosting card, nevertheless, we do have to keep in mind. Obviously, another GOAT of the current format, Professor's Research, discard your hand, draw 7. Red's Challenge, another sort of forgotten about card. Reds actually did see some play when it first came out in a couple different decks in low counts. But I think Reds is still a solid card. Discard 2 cards from hand, search your deck for any card, put it to your hand. So the effect is really, really strong. It's just, it's your supporter card, so you're not going to play this in high counts just because only one card a lot of times isn't really enough. But Reds we do still have floating around. Roller Skater, discard a card from your hand, draw 2. If it's an energy, draw 2 more. So discard 4, or I'm sorry, draw 4 to discard an energy could be good in certain decks out there. However, like I said, Research and Money are going to be generally our best options. Rosa, definitely one of my favorite cards. Unfortunately, Rosa is mainly only good in like one prize, stage 1, stage 2 decks. Unfortunately, those haven't been the best up until now, but in those decks, Rosa is one of the best considerations because you can grab a Pokemon Trainer and a basic energy. So a lot of times you can go like Rare Candy, stage 2, attach your energy, and you're good to go. We have Roxy, definitely a pretty cool, unique card we have. So we can discard 2 non-GX or EX Pokemon, draw 3 for each one. We've seen this with like the Coughings and Wheezings, and a couple different decks using the Roxy engine. So I think Roxy definitely seems good since we still have Coughing and Wheezing. So I still imagine decks will be playing this. Skyla, a card that has fallen quite a bit from grace. Whenever this first came out in Boundaries Cross, this was a common 2-of in almost every deck in the format for a few sets. Not as good in this day and age with all of the other good trainer searching options like Greens, Bills, or even like Jirachi or the Inteleon line. Skyla definitely is a little bit of a weaker option. Of course, Welder, another great card. It's kind of a draw supporter, kind of an energy acceleration card. But yeah, obviously one of the best cards we have in the game right now. Has been kind of a game-defining card ever since it's come out over the past year or so. Lucky Egg, this has definitely been kind of a cool card we've seen in some of the like Baby Blacephalon decks. It did get a little bit weaker now that Tool Scrapper came out, but I think this is still a cool ability. Draw until you have 7 if the Pokemon it's attached to was knocked out. And then we have Draw Energy, just colorless energy, draw a card. We can play this with something like Porygon Z if we want to draw a bunch of cards extra to help get set up better. And then believe the last card is Speed Lightning, a newcomer to the format, but of course this is definitely one of the best Lightning cards we have in the game right now. Lightning energy, and you get to draw 2 cards in the process. And guys, that's going to be it. We had a lot of cards on this list to look at. As you can see, the rotation really didn't hit us too hard in terms of our consistency boosters. So I think most decks are going to function just fine after the rotation. One of the only decks or types of decks I think does get hurt is going to be stage 2 one prize decks that really don't want to play research. Like, I think for a lot of stage 2 decks, they would just want to play like 4 Marnie, 4 Cynthia, and that be it. But research is a much more aggressive card, and the discarding effect is honestly really harsh for those styles of decks. So I think that might hurt their chances. Not that stage 2s have been good lately anyways, but just something to keep in mind. But overall, like I said, guys, I think we still have a lot of good stuff in the format, and I think most decks are going to continue to sort of set up just as normal, which is definitely a good thing. But yeah, guys, that is going to conclude part 1 of our post-rotation guide. We have a bunch of other parts coming up. I'll be sure to create a playlist and put a link in the description to each of the other parts whenever they do go up. But of course, guys, sound off down below in the comment section. What are you guys thinking about the rotation? What sort of engines are you excited to work with? Are there any certain cards you are going to be missing from the rotation once it goes into effect? Sound off below down in the comment section. Let us know what your thoughts are going to be. But with that being said, if you guys did enjoy this content, feel free to like and subscribe, and consider supporting this channel as well by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/rarecandytcg, or by picking up some merch from our online store, rarecandytcg.com. It would mean a lot. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.